Thank you. I think this discussion is of profound significance for the world. Our safety and our survival may depend on us getting to the bottom of what happened with COVID, because there are reasons to believe that this was a laboratory created virus and one that was funded by the US government, and that fact, if it turns out to be the case, it is not certain, but there are reasons to believe it to be the case, that it was covered up the investigation of that possibility. Let me say that I chaired a commission for the Lancet Medical Journal for several years on COVID. And one of the issues before that commission was the question of the origin of the virus, SARS-CoV-2, that caused the pandemic and that causes the disease. And we looked intensively at this question and followed the evidence and followed the forensic evidence as well. And by forensic evidence, I mean the investigative patterns that many brave investigative reporters pursued, because the US government did not act honestly, and the scientists engaged with the US government did not act honestly. My experience on these issues dates back more than a quarter century, because I have advised the World Health Organization on pandemic diseases. I played a direct role in designing and creating the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria, and have been involved with the question of pathogenic disease for a very long time. Let me again say at the outset of our discussion, we don't know the full story of the origin of this virus. There are, of course, two main hypotheses. One is that it came out of nature, and the second is that it came out of a laboratory experiment. And I believe that the weight of the evidence is the latter, but I would not say it's conclusive.
Introduced Jeffrey Sachs explained that the interview focuses on his interpretation of the evidence surrounding COVID's origins, and preview that the discussion moved from scientific questions to transparency and public accountability.
Was that experiment in the United States of America?
Yes, very heavily. There are, again, multiple interpretations of how a laboratory creation and or release of this virus may have occurred. But I think the weight of the evidence on that hypothesis is that the basic scientific work in creating such a virus, if that's what happened, would have taken place in the United States, though the testing and possible accidental release of the virus may have happened in China. But clearly there was a US-China research program funded by Tony Fauci's division at the National Institutes of Health, and the nature of that work, the background of that work, the plausibility that that work resulted in this virus called SARS-CoV-2 was hidden from the American people, and many key facts that would be directly ascertainable continue to be hidden. And let me say that under any circumstance, in my view, Rand Paul's investigation is superbly right, brave, accurate, no vendetta. It is trying to find the truth of a pandemic that killed more than 1 million Americans and more than 7 million people worldwide. By counts, 20 million people. And Rand Paul bravely is pursuing this. Fauci's behavior in taking the Fifth Amendment was absolutely disgraceful, unacceptable. And if this person has any scruples and integrity, his utmost effort should be to find the truth. He does not behave that way, did not behave that way all through this pandemic, not at one moment. He was not forthcoming at any moment about the possibility that his research unit at NIH had funded the activities that led to this virus. He hid that possibility. He denied that possibility. He knew that what scientists were saying publicly was not what that they were saying privately. And he has a responsibility to the world to do the opposite of what he did in Congress.
Summarize Sachs' position. He argues the key issue is transparency around research, funding, and decision-making, not simply assigning blame.
Just to say, the whole idea that the lead scientist that oversaw the grants that were involved in this coronavirus research is subject to a broad sweeping presidential pardon. And then this same scientist is invoking the Fifth Amendment against the rights of avoiding self-incrimination is itself astounding. We need to know the truth of why 7 million people died in this pandemic. And a scientist should be devoting every morsel of his being to knowing the truth, especially one that may accidentally have been implicated in this. And the behavior is not about incrimination. The behavior is to understand, where did this pandemic come from? Now, the point basically is that dangerous research was being done and was contemplated to be extended in the years and months leading up to the pandemic itself. The kind of virus that causes the COVID-19 disease, a coronavirus, is the object of extensive research. Probably the world's leading researcher on this is a professor that, as I understand it, has been dismissed now from University of North Carolina. And there were very important grant proposals in the lead up to the epidemic that described extraordinarily dangerous research that point to the very changes in the virus that were observed that cause this disease. And there is reason to believe that this research was done under NIH funding, that it was led by a research team at University of North Carolina, that that research involved altering the natural genome, the genes of these coronaviruses, to create a new coronavirus that is what led to the pandemic. And the most significant sign of that is a change of the genome from what has ever been observed before in this class of viruses that is called a furin cleavage site. It is a number of genes that are added to the spike, the gene that in the spike that codes for the spike protein of this virus that makes SARS-CoV-2 so infective for human beings. And the research proposal that was hidden from the public view says that it was the intention of this team at the University of North Carolina and its partner team in the Wuhan Institute of Virology to insert these genes into a backbone of a virus that did not have those particular genes, that did not have a furin cleavage site, with the idea that that would change the behavior of the virus and make it more infective.
Why would anybody do this?
Explain that Sachs is pointing to a research proposal and arguing it warrants deeper investigation. Emphasize that these are his interpretations and that the broader scientific debate remains unresolved.
The hypothesis is that though the Defense Department turned it down, the work continued anyway on NIH grants, that is, on grants from the division, the National Institute for Allergies and Infectious Disease, that Fauci headed, and that the grants that Fauci was giving, in effect, enabled the continuation of a grant that had been turned down by another branch of U.S. funding, by what's called DARPA, which is a Defense Department agency, which had turned it down. So the argument is this extraordinarily dangerous research was proposed. It was a U.S.-China joint scientific venture. It was potentially extremely dangerous. It was turned down for that reason. It was funded otherwise because the same protagonists were on NIH grants that were funded. The work continued, the virus was created, and it escaped from laboratory testing in China when it was being tested on bat colonies maintained in the China Institute after having been created by the U.S. scientists. That's the hypothesis.
Okay,
and
how
just
does the
to
virus get from North Carolina to China? Is it an actual movement of the virus, or is
Yes.
it just the technology is transferred and they replicate it in China?
It's easy to send viruses, as one virologist said to me and said publicly. Viruses are sent in the mail all the time. They're constructed, they're put on filter paper, they are carried on airplanes in gear that scientists carry to and from. One of the members of this research group worked at Wuhan. So this was worked directly in the laboratory that was maintaining the bat colony on which this virus was ostensibly to be tested. That's the hypothesis. Let me be clear, this is not proven. What is absolutely decisively known is that this possibility was known from the start, and it was pushed aside so that people who claimed that this was a laboratory leak were called crackpots, conspiracy theorists, and so forth, by people who knew that this was a real possibility. The amount of lying that went on to the American people in the days, early period of the pandemic is now fully documented because of leaks, whistleblowing, and Freedom of Information Act releases. And Fauci was definitely part of that. His behavior was disgraceful.
Shift the focus from the origin question to the broader issue of public trust. Explain that Sachs argues the larger concern is whether institutions were fully transparent about competing hypotheses.
The kind of research that was underway and that may have caused the pandemic by creating this virus is ongoing. That is the point. It is ongoing. And it's ongoing probably with U.S. government active financing and support, but probably also in U.S. laboratories, maybe without the U.S. government even knowing about it. there was an extraordinary episode where Boston University, I believe it is, I'm pretty sure it was Boston University, used this so-called gain-of-function manipulation to create a modification of SARS-CoV-2. And it did this, I think, around 2022. And then the US government said, "How dare you do this? Who gave you permission?" And the university said, "We don't need permission. This wasn't on US government funding." And that episode by itself, which just passed with very little attention, is utterly shocking that a university could claim that it has the right to do this if it's not directly government funded without the monitoring of the profound spillover risks of this kind of activity. So understanding this issue is not merely a question of culpability, though after 7 million deaths or 10 million deaths or 20 million deaths, whichever number one picks, is enough of a reason. But the fact of the matter is understanding this may be key to our survival. And I can tell you absolutely without question, this I can say unequivocally, there was no attempt to explain honestly to the American people this possibility by the leading virologists who knew behind the scenes that this was a real possibility, if not a likelihood. And they never told the truth to the American people. And our newspapers, I will cite the New York Times because I found its behavior either shockingly incompetent or shockingly bought. I don't know which it was and is to this moment, but they continue to play this story as if this is harassment of this fine scientist rather than the question of getting to the truth. And the coverage just in the last couple of days by the New York Times, I haven't reviewed the others. As you know, I am in Asia and not able to read every bit of the American news, but the New York Times coverage is disgraceful. Disgraceful, because this is a live scientific issue handled with such ineptitude. It's shocking. This is not about Rand Paul versus Tony Fauci. This is about the origin of this virus when there is real reason to believe that we have not been told the truth.
Jeffrey Sachs' argument isn't simply about revisiting the past. He says the larger issue is whether governments, researchers, and institutions are willing to fully examine what happened and apply those lessons to future pandemic research. Whether viewers agree with his conclusions or not, he argues that transparency and independent scrutiny remain essential to resolving unanswered questions.